one. Hey, Brandon, are you there? Brandon?
Oh, hey, Seth. Is it that
Hey,
time
there you
again?
are.
Huh?
It's so nice to see you. I'm glad you're there.
Yeah, is it that time again?
It is that time again. Yes.
I've just been standing there until, from last week, waiting.
You just put yourself on pause and then just stood there until then.
Yeah. So what you got for us this week?
Well, trying to do a recap here, review our music that we've done for Intentionally Wes Anderson. And you did the first week as a surprise. I didn't know you were doing that on acoustic guitar and you were on vacation. So then I one-upped you by using a banjo, which is, as we can all agree, a much more sophisticated instrument.
With a pipe. You were smoking a pipe while you were doing it, right?
Yeah, it was great. Corncob pipe. And then you did piano last week. So I once again had to do a version of that. So I have my synthesizer here, which is a microKORG. I really like it. It's got a vocoder on it. And I painted the keys the opposite color like I'd seen Jack White do. So I painted the white keys black and the black keys white. So I've got a song for you if you're ready for it. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready for it.
Okay. I'm hoping that this goes okay and you can hear it okay, because I rather than recording it, I did it live, and I'm really hoping that the envelope stays the same and the arpeggio speed stays the same and everything. Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. Everything is going crazy. Everyone is feeling hazy. It's Wes and... Oh, no. See, it happened. Oh, shoot. Man, isn't that weird, though? It just, goes away.
Hey, man, everything's going crazy.
That is so... All right, hold on. We're going to have to probably restart the recording or something.
No, let's keep it going. Let's keep that in there. That's fine.
I just don't know how to get... That is so frustrating. I have no idea why.
Everything is going crazy. Everything is going hazy. Boop. Was that it? Was that the theme?
All right, hold on. Yeah, honestly, I think I'm just gonna have to stop and restart.
Don't.
Well, I don't know how to play this song then, honestly.
Okay, we'll come back to it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll talk about Darjeeling Limited a little bit while you do that.
Well, I'm gonna have to fiddle with sounds and stuff. It's gonna be.
We'll just screw it. I think that'll be good. I think that's funny.
Well, I had some great lines in the song, like, look here at this crazy feature. It's an underwater creature. It's Wes Anderson.
Wow. Man, that's so good.
Tear up tickets. Hold on. Third verse, which was going to go to a different chord, would have been tear up tickets for the plane, run and catch instead this train. It's Wes Anderson.
Oh, God. Dude, that's so good. So why can't you try it again?
I guess I could. I just, that's the earliest it's ever happened where it's gone weird like that. All right, I'm going to try it one more time. Are you ready?
Okay, yeah.
Please work this time. All right, here we go. Everything is going crazy. Everyone is feeling hazy. It's Wes Anderson intentionally. Wes Anderson intentionally. Look here at this crazy feature. It's an underwater creature. It's Wes Anderson intentionally. Wes Anderson intentionally. Tear up tickets for the train. Catch instead this train. It's Wes Anderson intentionally. Wes Anderson intentionally. Yeah.
Dude, weird. That's really great, by the way, but does the sound go down?
Well, that's the first time that's happened. So yeah, as I told you before we started recording, it's doing this weird thing where it feels like something's being adjusted, but usually it was like the tone of it. But now, yeah, it sounds like the tone's the same. The volume just went down like halfway through, and I have no idea why. And when I flip back onto it, it comes back in the way it's supposed to.
You know what? We should probably do like a compilation of our themes since the one from me for last week was kind of tinny because it was recorded through Zoom. We should do videos later of our themes because I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. Maybe we could rehearse a way to do one after the other seamlessly if we can figure out the keys between them all and just do them on the last episode. Oh God, that sounds so exhausting already.
Or just, go into a studio and properly record them.
Oh yeah, we could totally do that.
So this week we're talking about, and that was a great theme, by the way. I love the lyrics. This week we're talking about Darjeeling Limited. And before we start, I wanted to read something to you because I just want to see your expression of this.
Okay.
I want to read a review for you that I saw on Wikipedia from Timothy Knight of Real.com when this came out.
Okay.
He said, although the Darjeeling Limited pales in comparison to Anderson's best film, Rushmore, it's still a vast improvement over his last and worst film, The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
That is the worst movie critic of all time. That guy's a moron.
Yeah. So there's two things there. Like Rushmore is, in his opinion, the best movie that Wes Anderson's made, and Life Aquatic is the worst.
To be honest, at this time, so here's my guess. That dude's a Gen Xer, and he loves the 90s, loves grunge, and Rushmore feels like the quintessential indie 90s American movie. And he didn't transition well into the 2000s and doesn't understand either Royal Tenenbaums or Life Aquatic or Darjeeling Limited all that well. And so that's his feelings.
Well, let's bring Timothy Knight in now. I have him in the waiting room from Real.com.
From Real.com.
So we left off last time without asking, before we start on Darjeeling Limited, I did want to say, was Life Aquatic essential, Wes Anderson, for you?
I think so.
So that would be in a box set of Wes Anderson's best.
Yeah.
Okay. It wouldn't for me.
Yeah, I know. And this wouldn't for me, Darjeeling Limited. So
yeah.
Boom.
Me and Timothy Knight have our own box set.
Well, man, I'm gonna let you probably do a lot of the talking on this one because I think you like this movie more than I do. And well, that's not a surprise, but you know, we can kind of walk through it. Do you want to walk through it like through the film, like start at the beginning and work through the end? Okay. I felt like there was there was almost like a classic movie opening, you know, with almost like a chase scene from like a 50s movie, you know, where the taxis, you know, going through the streets and Bill Murray's in the back, you know, waiting to see if he's going to get there on time. I mean, that's unusual for the opening of a Wes Anderson film, didn't you think? Man, if you're talking, I'm not hearing you. Are you there?
Yeah.
Man, you were gone, you were frozen for a good like minute. This really does make me want to just sort of restart the recording.
Hold on, let me plug in the Ethernet cord.
Okay.
So this one didn't start with a painting.
Right. This one didn't start with the painting. There's just like it almost seems like a classic car chase scene.
Yeah.
Which is unlike any of his other movies as far as I can tell. But you know, kind of it feels like it sets it up for an upbeat movie, which it's kind of not, but it feels like that's what you're being set up for.
Yeah.
What else would you like to draw attention to from the beginning of the film?
Well, Bill Murray plays a very small role in this one.
Yeah, he doesn't have any lines, right? Or I guess he does. He's yelling at the train or something, but
that's my train. I think that's his only line. And then comes Adrian Brody, who hasn't worked on any Wes Anderson film to this point. So he's a newcomer with, you know, Owen Wilson, who's been in pretty much every single Wes Anderson movie to this point.
Yeah.
And Jason Schwartzman.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was thinking throughout the film, well, first of all, it's a great intro for Adrian Brody, like running past Bill Murray, you know? But also like throughout the film, I was thinking that we're like, man, I don't think of Adrian Brody as a Wes Anderson type actor, but like we were talking about, Wes Anderson has his own world. And it seems like once Adrian Brody got into that world, he totally acted like he was in a Wes Anderson film, you know?
Yeah. I'm going to close this door really quick.
Okay.
But that's such a great point because I completely agree. If you take some of Adrian Brody outside of Wes Anderson, it just seems like, I mean, the only thing I know to compare him to is Pianist.
Oh, you haven't seen Dummy then?
Mm-mm.
Do yourself a favor, go watch Dummy. It's an indie movie with Mila Jovovich as well. and it's about he plays a somewhat similar character here, but it's like an indie comedy where he like gets into ventriloquism.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty cool. It's got some really good acting, and it's just a really fun and kind of funny movie.
Are you talking about Being John Malkovich with Adrian Brody?
So this movie, you know, starts off differently. It's got some different actors, and it also has, we talked in the past about diversity. This, I mean, other than your three main characters, basically everybody else is Indian. So
yeah, and it's, you know, interesting talking about Adrian Brody coming into this world. There was two things I wanted to say about that too, is that he just looks so cool. I don't know how Adrian Brody does it, but somehow he just always looks so cool to me, especially with those glasses.
Yeah.
That he constantly has to be taking off because they're not his prescription. And then when he's walking on the train, I don't know if you noticed this, but you see Brendan. He walks right past Brendan, who's in a cramped up little bed trying to type on a laptop. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that.
And then, so talking about diversity, it is very diverse in that you're basically seeing all of India, and most of the minor characters, aside from Brendan, and aside from Angelica Houston, are Indian actors. But it really kind of shows, just seeing Adrian Brody walk through the train, I started to think about the wealth of white people and how they have, like, so you see all these other people who are in cramped quarters, and then they have a really nice suite. And he has those $6,000 loafers and the $3,000 belt. And it's like, oh God.
So that's got to be a running gag about how either he's pretentious or he's lying about the value of those things, right? No one has a $3,000 belt, right?
I'm sure some people do.
What is? I mean, it's made out of leather and metal, like every belt. Like what is it? Some kind of, is it dragon leather?
It's just the brand. I was watching an interview with Elijah Wood where he was talking about some jeans that he had. And so I looked up those jeans, and the jeans were $600 or something.
Yeah, but that's still 1/5 of 3,000.
But that's just one example of how, like, you start to live in a different world when you have a lot of money. $3,000 may not be a lot to you. I would think, who would spend money on that? But he probably knows somebody who spent $10,000 on a belt. So who knows?
Yeah.
But as I was watching, I was thinking, yeah, this is great that it's diverse, but it also shows off just the accumulation of wealth that white people have and the privilege that we have. But I don't want to get too deep into that because I know that'll, you know, I don't know who's watching these, but I'm sure that that's probably, I don't want to get into a political thing with this. It's just interesting watching that they had that whole cabin to themselves, and then people from India were actually in cramped quarters.
Yeah. And I think you're kind of impressed with that throughout the film. You know, they go to that market and they're just buying whatever they want because everything there is so cheap compared to what they're used to. So, you know, but yeah. So I think there were some really cool, there's diversity. There's also some sort of understated points there. I did notice, I wanted you to know, the overhead shot as the person's walking.
Yeah. You saw it. Okay. Isn't that a cool way to frame something?
Yeah. That was cool.
Whenever you walk with something, you're going to be thinking about that.
Am I in a Wes Anderson film?
So you started out saying this is one of your least favorite. Can you tell me some things you didn't like about it or didn't enjoy? You want to start with the things I don't like about it? Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I don't like the music as much in this one. There are a couple sitar songs that are kind of neat, but the rock or whatever songs that would go on the soundtrack, I actually don't like any of them. They're not bad. They're just really blasé and boring and generic to me. I would also say I wrote some notes on this one. So looking through the notes here, because I have a whole thing. It kind of feels, the whole film feels sort of underwhelming and unsatisfactory. I get almost similar vibes to this as I do in like Bottle Rocket in some scenes, where it just feels like a regular 90s movie with 90s people, even though it came out way after that.
What's unsatisfying? Is it the plot or the character arc, or
kind of all of those? Actually, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of dynamic. I mean, there is some. You know, the characters do change a little bit, but it's not terribly dynamic. There's not a satisfactory, you know, there's not a compelling storyline. I feel like the plot is a little disjointed, especially when they show that car episode. It's sort of a flashback to their dad's funeral when they're at the boy's funeral in India. And I remember I went to write a note and I looked back up and they're all standing there and they look and I was like, I hadn't seen this in a while. And I was like, wait, what just happened? And they do this scene for reasons, that seem head scratching at best. And then they go back to the boy's funeral in India, and you're just kind of like, what was the point of that? Like, who gives a shit? Like I don't know. I felt like that regularly in the film. So,
man, that's interesting hearing your opinions because I guess I think differently about a lot of the stuff. I will agree that the music isn't as enticing as it has been in previous Wes Anderson films because there really is no score here. Mark Mothersbaugh isn't involved. And I think after this, I wonder if Alexander Desplat, who is it that starts to take over? I don't know if he takes over on Fantastic Mr. Fox, but I know he's in Moonrise Kingdom Forward. So there's no score here, and all it is Indian music, basically. And then the few songs that you do have, which Wes Anderson usually does, those 60s rocks, they're not big hits. So you have that song from from when they're going to the funeral. And it doesn't even stick out in my head. It's so kind of generic. So there's very few, except for, I will say, with the exception of the last song, Les Champs de Lys, I think is how you pronounce it, the French song. That's like bum bum but don't, that's
during the credits.
Yeah,
that was cool, but that's almost like not even part of the film. Anything that plays over the credits is like, but yeah, that was kind of neat.
I think I have a different experience this because I'm the youngest of two older brothers, so there's a lot that's familiar to me, and just watching the dynamics, there's a few scenes where you see one scene in particular where they're bringing the child back that died, and the father's there, and Adrian Brody's trying to walk towards the father who just lost his son, and Owen Wilson actually holds out his hand to back him up. It's that kind of older brother dynamic between the other brothers is just so true to my experience, or just Jack ordering, not Jack, but Francis ordering for the other ones.
Yeah.
And I think that's what originally draws me in, is that dynamic between three brothers and how they relate. And even the best line to me is, I wonder if we could have been friends outside of this. And I think Francis says, well, maybe we'd have had a better shot. I can't remember if it was Francis or Peter, but
Peter says that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we would have had a better shot. And I think that's so true. And especially with the psychological things they've been through, and that their mother's constantly running away. Their father has just died and they haven't talked in a year, and they're constantly betraying each other. So there's a lot that goes into all that has made this relationship difficult. And now you're seeing them come back together and trying to hold it together as best they can, but they're struggling because they're now adults. They don't have to live together anymore, and they have a choice about. And so that just means a lot to me. I will say the overall color of the film sometimes is too saturated, or I didn't like the color of the film, which I think is to represent India. You kind of have this harsh yellow or harsh orange on the camera. That sometimes got in the way. But outside of that, I actually enjoyed the funeral scene where they switch back and forth, because you get to see that this past year has just all been about death. They're trying to have this spiritual revitalization in their lives, but they're having a hard time getting past their father's death and the fact that they experienced their mother's death emotionally a long time ago.
Yeah.
And now they're trying to travel to her to experience life again in that relationship. And then you see them only disappointed again. But by the end of the film, they're reinvigorated because they realize they have each other, even though they've been failed.
That seems like the main plot point, to be honest, is that they were kind of semi-alienated from each other, and then they kind of come together by the end of the film. And I guess there's some nice things about that. But I kind of felt like that family of origin dynamic that's in a lot of Wes Anderson films is definitely in this one, and in a very particular way. It's less about the parent-child dynamic as it is about the sibling dynamic. And I even told Chelsea this. She walked in while I was watching part of it, and I explained, I think Brandon likes this because he's got two brothers, and there's a lot of similarities here. But uh, she walked in and literally watched like 5 seconds, like, oh God, because it was in that scene. It was such a Wes Anderson thing where it's like they're talking on the train, and there's like the center point is like just the table, and then let's see, on your left is I guess either Francis or Peter, and on the right it's blank because he's out of screen at the moment, but they're talking, and then Jack leans into the shot, and it's one of those typical Wes Anderson dialogue scenes. And she was just like chuckling and rolling her eyes, because it was just like,
There's a lot of intentional framing on this, and apparently they actually built the bus for this movie, or not the bus, but the train for this movie. So they didn't have a train, and they built it for this, and the train would actually travel to a destination each day they were filming. And so but you're also limited to where the camera can move within this train.
Yeah.
And so you see a lot of these takes. One that was a long one take that I thought of without any cuts, was when they finally get to the airport after the boy's funeral, and Francis is saying, okay, we're going to go over here. Then we'll go to the bathroom and get a shave. And you see each of one of them go to the phone to make a call. Francis calls Brandon, Peter calls Alice, Jack calls his girlfriend or whatever. All that is one take. And I was really impressed by the framing of it, by the choreography, as well as the way the camera moves. And there are a lot of those pans in this movie that's really fascinating. And then a lot of particular things where a character will be out of scene and Wes Anderson kind of zooms in on him.
That's a classic. Yeah. Starts way out and it's like a little bit unsteady, it's kind of jerks as it goes in.
Is that a classic thing? This is the first film I recall as far as what we've seen that occurring in.
No, he does it. I know he at least does it in Royal Tenenbaums at the opening film scene when Ned Plimpton asks his question. It goes up and it's he's up in the balcony. It sort of zooms in there.
Yeah, that's a quick zoom. Yeah.
I think he might have done it once in Royal Tenenbaums as well, but I'm not entirely sure on that. But I know he's at least done it in one film before this. And I know he does it after this. So.
The one that was questionable to me is when Francis is retelling what happened to his face, and you have the camera way back in the train, and it's slowly zooming in on him as he describes the motorcycle accident. That one wasn't probably a good choice to make, since this is a detailing of, why his face is messed up. And it seemed a little, what's the opposite of intimate? It seemed...
I don't know, at arm's length,
Yeah, literally though, with how far the camera is. Were there any funny moments to you in the film?
Yeah, I did laugh out loud a couple times. I don't know if I noted any of them in my notes. I will say there were some really, I think, symbolic moments that might have been. Oh, there was. Just the oddness of the dialogue, again, typical Wes Anderson, when they're, after they've gone to the market, they're walking out and it's evening time and they each have one line right after there. So Jack looks up and goes, those people are laughing at us. And so it pans up to these kids sitting up there laughing at him. And then it comes down to Francis and he says, I love it here. And he says something about the country. And then it pans down to Peter and he says, those kids are playing cricket with a tennis ball. It's like three completely, disjointed statements just rendered one after the other. It's just like observations. This is happening and this thing over here and that thing is happening there,
And in some ways that represents the emotional life of the brothers too. How they're all experiencing things different. Jack is feeling shame because they're laughing at him. Francis is completely oblivious to that, just saying, oh, this is beautiful. And then Peter's in the moment saying they're playing cricket with a baseball bat.
So that might be one of the more interesting things here. I don't have the same sort of three brother dynamic that you do in your family of origin, but if you talk about classic child, ordering of children and their personalities, Francis is pretty obviously like the older take charge. I know everybody and I understand what's going on. You also find out at the end he's modeling his mom's behavior in a lot of ways
Yeah.
about like ordering their food for him and raise your hands if you want blank.
Yeah.
What's funny is that his mom and he are both usually right. Like they do know the other kids well enough so that when they do order those things, that is what they want.
Yeah.
Um,
So I want to comment on that really quickly, where Francis says, Peter, do you want the cookies? He's ordering for himself. And then Peter goes, I'll have the cookies.
yeah. I mean, for the most part, he knows. I just think, and I get it. Like Peter and any person doesn't want to be spoken for. They want to speak for themselves. So even if you are going to order the same thing they're going to order for you, you'd rather, I guess most people would rather just have the agency to do it themselves, right? So I think that's part of it. I also I think that Jack is like a really great youngest kid. I totally notice that all the time. For some reason, he reminds me of my own youngest child. I only have 2 kids, but Adley does the same thing. Maybe it's the hair or the fact that he's smaller than them, but he's always sort of running around being the sensitive feeling one and not feeling like he's in control or whatever.
That's totally me. Especially as I've gotten older, I've become more the lone wolf too. So I can relate to Jack a lot in that.
Okay. It's Peter that I like Adrian Brody as an actor and I like the character okay, but I guess I just don't know a ton about middle children always, I guess, seem to me like they're just whatever. They're not like the dominating leader types. They're not the sort of off doing their own thing type. I don't know what they are. They're just there.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what his mindset is. He's kind of confusing. And it goes to show, actually, when he talks about having a kid, how he thought he was going to get divorced before having a kid. And they said, wait, you thought you were going to get divorced? And he said, well, I don't know why. I love Alice. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of inconsistency in him. So, you have these, as you said, these polar opposites between Jack and Francis. Jack is in control. Francis is running away. And then you have Peter, who's kind of in the middle of this, but it's inconsistent because maybe he sometimes relates to Francis. Maybe sometimes he relates to Jack and he doesn't know where his priorities are.
Interesting you say that because I made a note that in one of those opening scenes, right after he wakes Jack up when he gets on the train, he starts smoking a cigarette with the shades on, and I thought he looks and sounds a lot like John Lennon right here. And the things that you just said about Peter are some of the things I would say about John Lennon. There's a lot of ways in which he's kind of inconsistent and kind of fluctuates back and forth between viewpoints, and it's classically wrapped up in the song Revolution, right? When you're talking about destruction, you can count me out. And like there's that feels so John to me. And so I think Peter's character, intentionally or unintentionally, kind of mirrors that, I think, a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to hear Wes Anderson say like there's a little bit of John Lennon in that character.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how Roman Coppola, Jason Schwartzman, and Wes Anderson wrote this. And there's another note too, is that the last film was Noah Baumbach, and now this film we have 2 extra writers. And so that's a break from what's the norm. But we're introducing Roman Coppola to the writing team now, who is the son of Francis Ford Coppola. And I don't know what other films he's written. He was also a part of Moonrise Kingdom. So I wonder how they wrote this, because I do feel like this is very exemplary of what it's like to have that 3-brother dynamic. And I wonder what they drew from for that as they were writing.
Well, do we know anything about the family of origins of these people?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I sort of wonder about that.
I know that Wes Anderson has another brother, Eric, who was in Life Aquatic, Royal Tenenbaums, and has done the artwork.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I wouldn't be surprised if he has another one. Although, once again, it's sort of like he seems to kind of understand all the viewpoints. So if he is one of those brothers in his family of origin, he seems like he's done a good job with empathizing with the other perspectives and dynamics in that relationship, right?
Yeah. One other note is I do think, so I talked about Adrian Brody looking cool in this universe, but also Jason Schwartzman is just, I think, a really outstanding actor. If you look at Rushmore and then this film, those are completely 2 different people, and you're sold on both of them.
Yeah.
And I think, and also for some reason, I guess he filmed this whole movie barefoot. So there are a lot of running scenes, and I'm just thinking, what was this choice for, and why is he barefoot throughout the movie?
He's a wild man.
He's a wild man.
He's also, I wonder if it plays into his shortness. Shortness probably reinforces the idea that he's younger, maybe, and a little less mature. And he's already naturally shorter than either of those other two actors, but having his shoes off even kind of exacerbates that. So maybe that was perhaps a reasoning for it as well.
It could be. He also has a funny saying where he says, "I love you both, but I'm going to mace you." He maces them.
Actually, speaking of that brother dynamic, with the phrase "I love you," there's a part early on in the movie where I think Francis says, "I love you," and Peter says, "Thank you," and Jack says, "I love you too." That's so funny.
Yeah, and I think that does speak to Jack's sensitivity. He's more sensitive to those things, whereas Peter, again, is a little more inconsistent.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk briefly about the mother who is in a convent somewhere on the outreaches of India, or the Himalayas, I guess, because that's where they're heading.
Yeah, northern India.
Yeah. So that made me think about something we've talked about with Thomas Merton and the monastery there, where Richard Rohr was visiting that monastery, and they were talking, they weren't very complimentary of Thomas Merton because he was kind of the famous monk and he traveled a lot and did all that. But Richard Rohr made a point, I remember him saying in a podcast, that Thomas Merton had said to the other people there that you guys are just introverts. You don't actually want to, get more spiritually, what's a good word?
Like enlightened, or
more spiritually enlightened. You're just kind of introverts. And that's what I thought about Angelica Houston's character, who I don't think has a name. It's just Mom.
Yeah.
She uses this nun personality as a way to excuse her running away from life.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I think that happens a lot. I mean, I know for a long time I wanted to be a monk and live on a monastery, and sometimes still do, but a lot of time that's connected to just wanting to run away from things.
Yeah, I can see that. It's weird too, because I guess I'd forgotten she was a Christian nun in India from the first time I watched it. And so when we watched it again and they mentioned it, I'm just like, that's weird, right? Like, if you're going to be in India as some kind of like living in a convent or something, shouldn't you be something else?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I assume that there are probably some leftovers from British colonialism or something like that, to where there are convents. It was also interesting hearing the children sing, who are singing in a very Indian dialect and tone. If you've listened to any kind of Indian music, they're singing that tone, but it's interesting hearing them sing with the Christian hymns.
Yeah. It just made me wonder, like, what in Wes Anderson's mind made that worth putting into the story? Like, it is it's probably his most spiritual film. There's praying and they're visiting the shrines and stuff. Did he just feel like he didn't want it to be just Hindu? I don't know. It just didn't. I don't know. It didn't make sense to me.
Because I don't think he has a Christian background. I could be wrong. I mean, he grew up in Texas, so it's probably immersed in that, in his culture growing up. But it is interesting that you would have. I mean, that's also Roman Coppola and Jason Schwartzman, though, too, writing it. So we'd have to see probably what their backgrounds are and why they thought that should be included. But do you think there's any kind of analogy or metaphor for the man-eating tiger? Does that mean anything other than what it is?
I kind of wondered that. I mean, I do think let's pause on symbolism for a little bit, because I think there's some pretty strong symbolism here. I didn't pick up anything with the man-eating tiger, unless I did wonder for a moment, were you supposed to believe that, or supposed to understand that maybe she got eaten by the tiger when she leaves? I mean, I don't think you're supposed to, but then they do show it in that weird montage where everybody looks like they're on a train, even though they're not. Like, some people are in a plane and hospital bed and all that kind of stuff. They show the tiger at the end, and you kind of wonder. And then I think the scene after that is explaining how she just left. But there could be some symbolism in there, maybe.
I guess I
Maybe
was thinking
more
about
than
the
that.
man-eating. Sorry, what?
I said maybe it means more than that.
I was thinking if it was going back to dealing with that abandoning, dealing with abandonment. And if the man-eating tiger could somehow represent some kind of psychological facing your fears, because originally that's why that was supposed to be a surprise, because no one would have come if they knew that they were going to go see their mother. So there's a lot of facing their fears around this relationship with their mother, and really wanting that mother presence in their life, but not willing to admit that they need it so bad. Because you can see the second they step into it, how badly they want her approval.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the man-eating tiger, to me, I wonder if it represents some aspect of facing that fear of abandonment and then moving beyond it.
Yeah. That could be. I think there certainly is a way in which you could understand it that way. And it wouldn't surprise me, considering, like I said, I feel like there's all these let's see, I think one of the best symbols is happens at the beginning and it happens again at the very end, but to a much greater extent, where they're running to catch up to the train and they're having a hard time and they got all this baggage, and at the end they have to all throw it off, and it feels like you have to get rid of your baggage to finally sort of progress spiritually. That was pretty significant, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I remember reading that got mocked a lot. People thought that was too
obvious.
Too obvious, but I don't think it is. I think it fits very well, because all throughout the movie, you're seeing how they're trying to fit all this JLW luggage. I think it's JLW luggage onto every, new place that they're at, and trying to figure out how to carry it all.
Yep.
And I do think that's a part of spiritual life, is learning what can be let go of and how can we let go of it in a way that's healthy.
And how much it gets in the way and causes unhappiness.
So to me, that's a beautiful scene, but to a lot of other people, I think it's too, like, as you said, too obvious.
Yeah, it's just funny because like people shit on things for being too obvious, but then if you're not pretty obvious, people will miss it altogether or just not even watch the movie in the first place. So
I mean, how else would you represent them moving beyond their parents are now dead? I mean, emotionally and physically, their mother has left them for the final time. They'll probably never get in touch again. So both their parents are dead, and all they have is them. How else would you communicate that?
Yeah, I don't know. And it's not as on the nose as I noticed. So before Francis says it, there's that scene where the train gets lost, which is a hilarious concept. First of all, that the train gets lost. Like, I'm pretty sure that doesn't actually happen ever, but in the movie, they wake up and the train stopped and people are trying to figure out where to go, and they say, how far off course are we? And the answer is, no one knows. We haven't located us yet. And I remember when the guy says that, I was like, oh man, that's pretty on the nose. But then Francis even acknowledges it, and he goes, is that symbolic? We haven't found us yet, so he even it's almost like breaking the fourth wall, sort of thing. So the losing your baggage thing is not as quite on the nose as that, but I just think that kind of stuff is kind of neat. This movie came out at the time that you and I were talking a lot about Thomas Merton and getting into Indian music and reading, these different Hindu guys and stuff. So,
I love Francis's language, or Owen Wilson's language, throughout. Every time he points to something, he doesn't have the right words, so he'll just say, meet me on that thing up there, and you turn and it's just a big hill. And he says, all right, put the rubies on the thing over here, and you see that it's actually an altar. So there's these funny moments where he loses language and just uses thing for whatever is going on. But one of my favorite moments out of the film is when his shoe gets stolen and he goes, I got my face smashed in, Jack's heart is broken, and Robbie's having a child. Let's get into it. For some reason, that does remind me so much of those three brothers, where you had these nicknames. He says Robbie's having a child because him and Jack had talked about the That's hilarious to me. But even prior to that, the kid steals the shoe and Jack goes, but he left his shoe shine kit. just completely oblivious that the kid is obviously a thief.
Yeah. It also is weird. It is weird that he steals the one shoe. Like, I really don't know what you would do. I mean, I guess you could sell one, or maybe if you steal enough, you could eventually pair it up. I don't
I
know.
don't know. There's
But
also a
whatever.
weird moment where they cross the children who are actually trying to get the food across the lake. And Owen Wilson's character, Francis, says, "Look at these assholes." And I've always wondered, like,
I
what?
think he must have been about to say something else, right? You feel like he was about to say, like, just living a carefree life, or whatever, something.
Yeah.
But there is a pause before Jack says that thing's going to tip over.
Yeah.
And I do find it interesting. That seems to be a pretty significant turning point for them, as their encounter. I mean, it's set up so well. If you're looking for like foreshadowing of losing your baggage, right before all that happens, they're walking around the thing, and Owen Wilson, Francis, this thing tips over that he's rolling with, and his bags fall on the ground, and they're pissed, and they're walking out in the wilderness in the hot stuff with all their stuff. And then that happens, and that makes them realize, like, this is real life. This is how most of the world's people live, and people die, and your petty little meaningless stuff doesn't really matter. You don't need to be so absorbed in it.
And I think that happens. You can tell when Peter says, "I lost mine." There's something about that scene that really is bringing them back to reality and letting go of all that other petty stuff, as you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason for the funeral and all those other moments, is how grief can pull us into what am I even arguing about? What's going on here? Why am I getting so worked up over these little things? And why am I trying to control everything?
Yeah.
Grief, those moments like that can remind you of reality.
I think the pandemic has done that for some people now, which I'm hoping works out good in the long run. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably going to be there's going to be a lot of trauma to that, I'm sure. I wonder if some kids are going to turn into germaphobes because of it, just being raised up in that. But then there's also the trauma of when you can't control things. Helplessness is always a source of trauma. But if you have good support, then you can kind of work through some of those issues. But if people are isolated and they just went through the pandemic, then yes, there's going to be some reactions to that. Plus, Trump's presidency, plus Black Lives Matter, plus all these other things that were occurring at the same time.
Yeah.
Some people felt more connected, came out of it more. I came out of it feeling more connected with my wife, and other people felt that too. And other people actually made important job decisions. And so some people benefited from it, and some people,
for sure.
Yeah,
sure. Some people, and then a third group of people coped with it by increasing their drug or alcohol use, which I was gonna connect with. I've been drinking more since the pandemic started than normal, not an insane amount, but that connects a little bit with the movie where, like you said earlier, they're living in the shadow of their dad's death, sort of in the shadow of their mom's abandonment, which is a form of death. And they're all, when they first got on the train, they've all got these like drugs they just got, and then they're taking them and they're sort of dealing, using that to cope with these things. And they're asking each other, what's that? And they're taking all these things, which I kind of find interesting and informative for our own sort of situations we're in.
Yeah, it's funny and sad. They obviously need those external sources as far as emotional soothing and coping. But the way that they do it actually is fun, because they're all kind of these addicts together, and they're all kind of sharing everything. And that's a source of support to, them together. And I think they realize that by the end. I'm not sure really I'm not sure what else to point to talk about.
That's okay. I have to go pick up kids from school in a few minutes, so we can start to look at rankings and stuff if you want to.
Yeah, this one would be pretty high to me. I would put it, as I said, above Life Aquatic for emotional reasons. I don't know if I can speak to actually how the movie is seen for other people who are fans of Wes Anderson, but for emotional reasons, it connects. I think I'd give this one a 7.5.
That's funny, because I think I'd give it a 7. Oh, you should write this on your notepad.
I do need that.
I think I'd give it a 7, but I was debating 7 or 7.5 earlier. So it's funny that you like it you would put it higher on the list of his movies, but it's still, we're in the same neighborhood as far as overall scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah, you and I have different rankings, and I think you even spelled that out before, where you were saying that if anything's below a what, an 8. I thought you were saying like if anything's below a 8 or 7, it's not worth my time, really.
No, if it's below a 5, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, like, that's B movies and, dumb, like, white chicks or whatever stupid, it's like that kind of stuff. You're like, well, obviously I'm not watching that. So, but 5 or 6, that's where I said about Bottle Rocket was something you might watch once, and okay. Okay, so 7 and 7.5, that's solid. And you already said you'd put in your essential Wes Anderson and I wouldn't, right?
I don't know if I would actually put this in essential Wes Anderson.
Okay.
Because I'm thinking outside of my own perspective and thinking about canon. And I don't think this would be canon for many people.
Yeah, it doesn't really reinforce, it expands the universe of Wes Anderson because it's in a different setting and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I think you totally understand the other films without ever having seen this.
Yeah, I think so too. And I will actually remark really quickly, one complaint I have is that end scene where you're seeing all the different characters and where it's supposed to look like a train car, but it's actually a hotel and an airplane.
Yeah.
I don't know that actually brought anything to the story.
Yeah, I wondered about that. Okay, so I did wonder when another symbolism moment, they're always running to chase the train. They're always behind and trying to catch up to it. And I wondered, is the train sort of like time? Like you always feel like you're running out of time and you're sort of trying to catch up with things. And if you view the train as time, then maybe all those people are they're on the train of time as these significant life events happen, or as the mundane life events happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's what's meant. I don't know. But you're right. I watched it and I was like, okay.
I'm going to go with that. I want to say more, but I'm going to go with that because I have 7% battery on my laptop. So I'm Brandon Michael Williams.
And I'm Seth Andrew Hecox.
And together we're
Intentionally Wes Anderson. Nice. All right. Well, I'll see you, Brandon.
See you, man.
Bye.